Todd, so this will be a lot of fun. I've talked to a few people that worked with you, so it's been someone. I feel like my buddy Jamie reached out a long time ago. We didn't connect, but
Yeah,
yeah. So what I love to hear about is obviously people's journey for the first credit, but for you, it's kind of unique. You're living in Portugal now. Where'd you grow up in the States?
I grew up in Kentucky, but moved here in June of 23.
Oh, okay. What is do you have family from there? Wife's family?
just,
Really? That's
just
wild.
decided we were going to grab a place in Ireland that didn't work out, so we ended up finding our way to Portugal and
Wow. What's the weather
walked through.
like there? Got to be a big difference, right? Growing up in
No,
Kentucky.
it's basically
Oh,
exactly like California because I lived forever in California. So,
oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
um, it's very similar to California here. The shrubbery is the same. The climate
Yeah.
is the same. We get a little more rain, but other than that, it's great. And
All right.
so,
Look at that. Kentucky boy. And you think like when you go back in time and you could talk to yourself, like not even obviously working in film coming from Kentucky, because you think like when you were growing up, or even when I was growing up, I'm younger than you, but there was always that like it seems like so far away. And I feel like now, obviously with like social media and
yeah.
how everything's instantaneous, it feels easier to achieve. Obviously it's not easier, but it feels more attainable. But from Kentucky, what was that first thing? Was it acting? Was it writing? Like what was that first dive into it?
Honestly, it was telling ghost stories around campfires. That's the thing
Nice.
that I enjoyed entertaining. And then I thought I wanted to write novels because, I'm from Kentucky. That's the only thing I couldn't fathom Hollywood. I couldn't fathom television. That
Yeah.
didn't make any sense. But I could thought, well, maybe, I'd read Stephen King. I thought, well, maybe I could write books. And people there told me, oh, no, that you'll never, that's a hobby. That's not something you can make a living at. And then later, after I'd gone to college, I talked about coming out to LA. And I remember friends, the parents of friends mainly telling me, oh no, that will never work. You could never do
Oh,
that.
great.
You'd have to find something where you could actually make a living.
Yeah.
And then years later, I was living in Texas and I ran into a friend of a friend who knew the guy who did uh, Major Payne. Remember Major Payne
Oh,
with Damon
yes.
Wayans?
Heck
And
yeah.
so Dean Laurie had said, look, if you really want to do this, I'd sent him something I'd written. He said, if you really want to do this, you got to move to LA. And so I just loaded up my 486 computer into an old Chevy pickup and drove to California.
Wow. So what year is that? That's got to be what? Mid 90s?
That was 96.
Oh, okay. So
96.
you're pretty young doing that.
Uh,
Say,
yeah. Yeah, I was
yeah.
26 maybe. Yeah.
Was there like a writers group or some kind of creative group or somebody you just like randomly bumped into, or was somebody at the school? Did you go to school in Texas?
I went to school in Tennessee and
Oh,
went to
okay.
school with a guy who had gone to high school with Dean Laurie, who did Major Payne and Jason Goes to Hell. And it
Okay.
was Dean's doing Jason Go to Hell, which led me to Sean Cunningham. And so
Wow. Okay. So how early do you like when you get out there, what's the first step? Are you doing like the old school spec scripts for TV shows or spec scripts for sequels, or what's the first step that you had when you were out in California?
Well, Dean had an office in Universal. He had just done, I think, Madman or or Happy Gilmore. He'd done a couple of movies for Universal,
Wow.
and so he wanted to produce his own movies. And he and I talked about a couple of ideas, and so he optioned a screenplay for me. So I wrote it for him. That was the first thing that I did.
Wow.
It was a scary movie about Bigfoot, which I know now
Okay.
everyone has written that, but I got to
Yeah.
think I was one of the first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Needless to
Yeah.
say, it did not get made. But that was my first, and I was sleeping in a hammock at the time, which sounds horrible, but it was great. Sleeping in a hammock in Venice Beach, California, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And but I was sort of rooming with four girls. They each had a bedroom, and so I slept outside.
Sounds horrible.
Yeah, it was horrible. And then eventually I ended up with my own little apartment and started working for Sean Cunningham. So then it all kind of took off from there.
Wow. So when you obviously the ad or how you connected with Sean, it was like, okay, we're looking to do a Jason sequel, but we can't mess up the timeline of Freddy vs. Jason, or no?
Well, I wish that's what it was. At
Oh,
first,
okay.
Sean just wanted to do movies that weren't really associated with horror. I did an adaptation of a book about young delinquent kids in Spanish Harlem, and I did a courtroom drama. And I remember at one point pulling him aside and like, Sean, I'm from Kentucky. Just let me do a horror.
Yeah.
I don't need to be writing courtroom dramas. Listen to me. Then eventually he was frustrated with the process on Freddy versus Jason, and so he said, let's just do a Jason movie. And so we started kicking around ideas, and eventually I stupidly suggested Jason in the future. But basically that was to keep it away from what they were doing with Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
what I
that's
said. When
how.
I talked to Patrick Lussier,
Yeah.
he worked with a bunch of buddy, and I said to him, what Todd was able to do is really a hard thing, you know? Because obviously you think of Jason as like, okay, this is this procedural horror. He gets killed, he gets brought back in some ridiculous way, and then that's how it flows. And then it's like, okay, Jason goes to hell. They tried something different. And for you, I don't know what your original idea might have been if the Freddy vs. Jason wasn't like on the table, but that's hard to be able to be like, okay, cool, you can do a Jason movie, but it has to be like, you can't mess up this timeline. And it's like,
No,
all
I
right,
mean,
well,
for me, that was really important to me. I
yeah.
knew I had done a draft of Freddy versus Jason, which was never
Oh,
even
okay.
read. It was sent to New Line. They kept it for about 2 weeks, and then they sent it back to us in the same envelope we had sent it to them in, unopened, and said, you know what, we read it. It's not for us. They hadn't even
That's
opened it.
amazing.
So I was like, that I had to respect that. That was good shade. Um,
Oh my
but
God.
um, but then, so I didn't want to mess up, whatever, because there were several writers on Freddy versus Jason. I didn't want to screw with that. And so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought if we did a Blade Runner kind of story where it's in the future and it's years later and they find him cryogenically frozen, and you go from there. I thought that would be the way to do it. And,
Yeah.
but they convinced me that would be too expensive. And so I said, well, let's do Aliens. Let's put it on a spaceship, set it in the future. And I think Jim Isaac came up with the idea that it would be like a school bus, but a futurized school bus. And they're coming back
Oh, yeah.
to Earth for an archaeological dig or for their archaeological class. And so I was like, that's cool. Play with that.
Yeah, it's a horror magic school bus. Jason
Exactly.
joins Magic
How could
School
you
Bus.
possibly go wrong?
But you got it made. That's the most important thing I think about, like working, especially writing any type of job. You did a
We
movie
did get it made.
that got made.
We did get it made, and it was fun. I mean, there was a lot I didn't know. I can remember, like, I'm wearing an earbud now, but back at the time, these didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I remember writing it into the movie that they had these little earpieces that they were talking into, and get on set because I was going to play one of the characters. And, there's a prop person there saying, we need you to go get a form poured into your ear so we can make these little things. And I was like, wow, all because I wrote 3 stupid words on a page. Now all the actors have to go through and get these little things poured into their ears and made, and they came out and they looked great. They had a little thing. It was wonderful. And so that was like really eye-opening for me. It's just, you think when you're writing that it's just you, and then suddenly you're opened up to this whole world that's everyone. And, you learn that a million things that can go wrong on any movie set, and then a million things just in the production leading up to it that could just stop the movie from ever happening. So
Yeah.
getting any movie made is, I don't care if the movie sucks or if the movie is brilliant, getting any movie made is a massive accomplishment.
Yeah, just to get to the first day on set.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that get scripts bought and it's like, wow, I'm making money, but then it just like sits. Somebody that they want it for won't be able to do it. So let's wait a year, and then things just don't work out.
Yeah, I've got a couple of buddies who made way more money than me, but they never got a movie made.
That's crazy.
So, I mean, they would much rather, trade their careers with mine because I have a couple of credits. So,
yeah. And what is that whole process? Like, why? Obviously, studios have an intention of making the movie, but there's like so many stories, even like with Batgirl that happened a few years ago, the Looney Tunes movie that they were going to bury, and then now it's like the Wile E. Coyote one. It was going to be buried, and then now it's going to come out, I think, eventually. But like, I get it's all like accounting, and we have to show losses and like this crazy. But people don't think about that when you're writing a movie. Like you said, you're just creating a world, creating characters, And it's like they might never jump off the page if
What's
all of these other
if
factors line up.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that though, because we never used to think about that. And now sadly we do think about that. And
Yeah.
it makes it a lot less fun. Like I wrote something that it was a female lead and it was more of an action movie. And I was later told this probably will never get made because you need an A-list, you need an actress uh, who can gain foreign money, who is worthy of foreign money, and who decides who is worthy and who isn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in the world of men and women, where the cards are clearly stacked in men's favors, men have higher price tags when it comes to foreign movies than women. And I was told, you're never going to find an A-list actress, and it's only the A-list actresses who have these price tags in
Yeah.
foreign markets. And so you're never going to find an A-list actress to play this sort of down and dirty action movie. And
Yeah. Even if
so,
the
the
person's
movie,
not the best choice for the movie, but if they're like, I
right.
talked to some producer one time, and he told me something around like it's the last 5 years or 10 years of their gross on films. And then that's why some
Yeah,
movies you're like, well, this movie's really actually a good script, but the person is just sleepwalking through it. But it's like
yeah,
that person, that actor that's sleepwalking through it wasn't in it. It probably would never get made. So it's like this weird
exactly.
double-edged sword. Like you want to make your movie, but at the same time, it's like, that's not the guy that I want in my movie because it
Yeah.
just doesn't work.
Well, you mentioned Lucier before. We had written a script several years ago, and we'd gone out with it, and people really liked it. And, we had a company come back to us and say, look, we'll make it, but we want you to make it for this A-list actor. And we were like, well, how would we do that? And they were like, well, they can only work for like 5 days. So you'd have them in the beginning of the movie, have them in the end of the movie, and have them a little bit in the middle of the movie. So, bring them in for 5 days work. And then, but we, on the poster, we put their face, and it's just such a weird way to make movies. I know we've all watched movies late night, and you watch this movie and you see this big name actor who's in it for a little short period of time and then disappears and then is in it in the middle and in it at the end. And that's the format. And that's a selling foreign movies format. And it's done constantly. And it changes the way. So you're no longer writing a story because it's the best way of telling the story. You're writing a story to fit an accounting form, marketing strategy. It's an
Yeah.
odd way of storytelling. Not all of them
Yeah. And
have to
that's like
do
a
that,
big
but
thing now. You have like indie
it is.
filmmakers or like
Yeah,
low budget. And again, nothing against it. It's like a negative term. You get what you can get to make a movie. But like I
exactly.
interviewed Eric Roberts, and I think since I interviewed him like 4 years ago, I think he has double the credits that he had then. And I've talked to people that reached out to me, was like, oh, how is Eric? And I talked to this one guy that made a movie with him. He was used probably like 10 minutes on screen time, but it was used right, like beginning, middle, end. Like he was like this guy that was like pulling all the strings. And then other movies, it's like, wait, he's just like a rando in this one scene, and he's in the middle of the poster, and you're like, that's kind of like that pissed me off. If I rented that movie, and it's like other person's not in it.
Yeah. And I've done that too. I've gone in and watched a movie thinking it was going to be this actor, and then the actor's really not in the movie. And now I
Yeah,
understand that that's just part of. It's almost like it's its own genre of film at this point. It's the big name actor who's really not in the movie. But
yeah,
that's how a lot of those movies wouldn't get made if it wasn't for that. And so,
no, that's true.
I mean, I don't know how to even answer your question because it's the industry has changed so severely, and I've watched it over the years change. Certainly in genre, like when I started out, slashers they were sort of on the way out. Nobody
They
was
were,
really
yeah,
doing horror movies. It was very hard to get a horror movie made back then. You really only had New Line and Dimension making the movies, and
yeah,
then after I think Scream came out, and that changed everything. Suddenly, everyone
it
was
did,
doing
yeah,
the self-aware horror, and that lasted for a while. And then The Ring came out, and suddenly everyone was doing Asian horror, and it always does that.
hmm
But right now, and there was a time, certainly, I look back at 10 years ago, suddenly all television, all movies, everything was genre, everything was horror, and it was kind of a great time. And then streaming came along, and everything has just the whole industry has basically kind of shut down and slowed down, and no one knows what is about to rebirth out of this
yeah,
mess that has been created. But it's
yeah.
tricky.
It's
But what
insane.
do I care? I live in a castle in Portugal. I'm fine.
Yeah, you're good. You're good, man. It's like I just saw Die Hard on the big screen like last Friday night. It was really cool
Oh,
to
that
see
would be
it.
fun.
And it was really neat. It was like a later showing. Everybody was like
Yeah.
really into it. And just to see Hans Gruber for the first time, like see him, it was like a really cool experience. But
Yeah.
think about that movie. If you ever watch like movies that made us or any of those things on like Netflix, and they have one for that, and it's like back in the day, it'd be like, oh, Bruce, the guy from Moonlighting, you're gonna have this TV guy.
That's right.
it's not like a curse word to be like, oh man, this person does TV. It's like Nicole Kidman in 92 or 93, she wouldn't be get caught dead on TV or like
Yeah.
the early beginnings of cable. Now it's like, oh, you don't do both? Or now you
Yeah.
just do those HBO limited series.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because there's a group of us who all sort of grew up in the business together. And those of us who went into features have a much different career than those of us who went into, or those of them who went into TV. TV is
Yeah.
the much more adult game. It's the much more, there's not as much development. You have to really be on your game. You have to work fast. You have to think fast. You have to write fast. I, I would much rather be in TV, to be honest. It just
Yeah.
seems like a much more mature way of making content, but it's a weird business right now.
It is, yeah. So when did you think of being in the movies? Was that something that was your decision to write yourself in, or was the director or producer like, hey, do you want to be in Jason X? Do you want to have a role in this?
I mean, I'd done theater in college and I really loved it. I
Oh,
liked it a
okay.
lot, but I hadn't thought about it. And it was Sean, I think, who said, you want to be in the movie? And I was like, yeah. He was like, well, what do you want to play? And I was like, I don't know, one of the grunts. I'll play Dallas. And I only chose Dallas because he was the biggest of the grunts. He had the most lines. And so that's how that happened. And then from that point forward, I think the next one was when we did
My Bloody
Valentine.
Valentine. Yeah.
And Patrick called one night, and I hadn't actually thought about being in that movie. Patrick called one night and he said they're doing they want to cast talking about the studio, Lionsgate wanted to cast a local for the role of Frank. And I was thinking, well, Frank's got all that gore and it's a sex scene, and we don't have a big budget and a lot of time. If a local, nothing against locals, but that seems like that would be tough. And he's like, yeah, I know. Would you do it? Like, let me ask my wife. And I asked her, and she was like, wait, do you mean the sex scene? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, badass. Of course, we're divorced now, but not because of that. But it was a fun scene. And I think Patrick's reason is because I was a bigger fella, and so the idea was if the minor could kill me, then he could kill anyone. And, so that was fun. So I got my first cool nude scene.
So, yeah. So when you're on these movies, like just say Jason X, for example, or My Bloody Valentine, as a writer, what is the continuing day to day? Obviously, you're acting in some scenes, but like when you're a writer, is it like during it? Are you re-looking at the script if things change? Like, how does that? Like, what's the day to day as a writer while on set?
I think everyone's take is different. My take was always once I worked with Jonathan Hensley. Jonathan Hensley had written Die Hard with a Vengeance, The Rock, Jumanji, a bunch of big movies. And he had said, you have to fight. He said, it's your name on the script. You're the one that's going to get blamed. If these idiot executives come in and give you a note that doesn't make any sense, you fucking fight. And I was like, okay. And I did. And, but then when it came time to actually shoot, to go on set, and this is something that I found with Patrick that I hadn't really found anywhere else, is that when we started working together all the way back on the movie that became The Messengers, we had sort of a shorthand where we could finish each other's sentences. And even if he went off on a tangent, or if I went off on a tangent, we could always meet back in the middle and make it work. And so it was nice to have that sort of back and forth. But and that was just when we were working on story. But when we got into the actual shooting, then I just took a back seat. And I felt like as the writer, as the lighting guy, as any crew member, it should be your role to fulfill the director's vision. Because, there's no reason to rock the boat at that time. At that time, the director is the commander, and just follow his lead and or her lead and make it happen. And so I felt like that was always the best way to go about it. So if he had thoughts and he had ideas, I was there to rewrite them. And I still
Yeah.
feel it should be that way today.
No, that's cool. Yeah, no, your name's on it. I've talked to people that like, they're like, oh yeah, I worked on this so and so movie. It's like, well, it's not on your IMDb. It's like, oh yeah, I told them not to put my name on the credits. I didn't like the way
Oh,
it
that
came
has
out.
happened.
And this is like special effects people. Like you don't think
Yeah.
they created something that's in the movie and maybe it got fully cut out. So like, why the hell would my name be? Why would I want my name in a movie when you cut everything I did?
And that does happen, and I understand
Oh,
that.
totally. Yeah. I helped an actor, Larry Hankin, I helped him put together his memoirs. He took a date to go see Pretty Woman, and he played the landlord in the opening scene. And he takes this date, and she's like rummaging through her purse in the opening scene, and he's like, "Oh, I got lines with Julia, right? I got lines with Julia." And they only showed the back of his head, and you didn't hear his voice come out of his mouth. It was just like a voiceover that they took of him like yelling. It wasn't even him. It was like the back of somebody else's head with his voice. And he was like, holy shit, you're rummaging for cigarettes. You missed my whole scene.
So I take it they're no longer together.
They're not together. And he was friends with Gary Marshall. So it's kind of a funny, quick
that is funny
anecdote. Like he was on Laverne and Shirley in the 70s, and they were rehearsing the scene where Larry danced with Shirley, right? Wasn't that Shirley?
Yeah, Shirley.
Penny Marshall.
Yeah.
Yes. So he's dancing with Penny Marshall. And Gary comes in and was like, what are you doing with my sister? All they were doing was rehearsing a dance scene. And he got like really protective. And Larry thinks that's why he did it. Took him out of the movie just to make him look like crap. I'm like, wow. A 17-year grudge.
That is a very old. Yeah, that's
something.
Yeah, that's a commitment to making it happen. Wow.
Yeah. So you get Jason X is made. That's obviously had to be a huge deal. Freddy vs. Jason, what, 2-3 years after that, right? 03 or 04 that came out. Did you ever, because obviously you're always writing. At this time, you're always trying to write ideas, put down little, even on a note card, I'm sure, like, hey, this type of movie. But like, would you have an idea for a 13th movie? Like, do you have anything written or an idea that you've pitched to like Sean or anyone?
Like for a
Friday
current
the 13th,
movie,
like,
or
for like a new one?
Back in the day, I certainly did, but these days, no, I haven't really thought about it. I was excited about the TV show. I was excited about what that could be. It's so, the rights are so weird right now. I don't even know. I would need to sit down with one of their lawyers just to find out what I could, I could create. And
it's a shame
what the rules are,
because a lot of those people are alive still. Like a lot of the final people. And I'm like, every time I haven't interviewed a lot of the final girls or the final, the one final boy from, well, not, there's a couple final boys, but from part 7, I can't think of his name right now. But I talked to him and I'm like, wouldn't it be so cool? Like the requel thing is kind of what everybody's doing now. You have like the stars from the old one, barely sort of in the movie. You're focusing on like what Scream did. And it's like,
Scream,
they should do that with this. Bring back those people. Get him back, get them back to Crystal Lake somehow, and then kill them all, and then start a new story or something.
Everybody to live. Bring back Tommy. Bring back all of those guys, and put them. Bring back telekinesis girl, who I can't remember. I know she's out there.
Yeah, Laura. I remember her. Laura Park Lincoln. I remember her. Oh, Kevin Spiritus is in part 7. Yeah, but like all the people, Jason, everybody. Jason Takes Manhattan. She's still around. Jensen Daggett. All those people. It would just be a cool. Again, it just gives those people, because a lot of times those horror people, some people have work after that, but sometimes you're like, everybody's not getting Kevin Bacon.
I think it's a great idea. You need to call Sean.
I should, yeah.
Yeah,
Sean, can this happen? It's like, oh yeah, well, doesn't Victor Miller on The Mask? Somebody owns rights to The Mask, but not to Jason Voorhees, which is kind of silly.
That's the issue. You got to get Sean and Miller back in bed together, and I don't know how you do that.
It's crazy. Yeah,
it is. And it's, I can remember it was tricky when it was just after Freddy versus Jason and the Friday the 13th reboot. It became tricky because then you had Platinum Dunes involved, and so it was, you had a bunch of groups at the top who were taking budgetary money, producing money, and so it's hard to then turn around and have enough money left over to make a movie. At least that was always my thought. And no, it's
Michael Bay, Explosions. You got which is not a bad movie. I'm just happy because I got to see that in the theater. Freddy
Yeah.
vs. Jason, Jason X, I did not sneak in. I was too young. And
Yeah.
I'm sure me and my buddies tried. But for 2009, I remember taking a date. It was on Valentine's Day. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
pretty, like, day before Valentine's Day. I'm like, this is pretty rad. But no, it's so cool that you had that opportunity to work on that. And then again, another movies that are hard to do. Like remakes are really hard. And to
Yeah.
be able to reimagine a movie, like
Yeah.
My Bloody Valentine. Like, how did that
That
come to
was
be? Did you connect with Patrick, or is that something you were doing on your own before you connected with him?
no, that was Patrick. Patrick was on early. Patrick was on a movie that I don't think we're supposed to talk about, because I think he was on it secretly. And we talked one night. He may have mentioned this in interviews. I can't remember.
Maybe.
But we talked one night. And he was stressed. He was doing reshoots, and I said, "Well, do you want me to take a look at the scene?" And I rewrote the scene like within an hour or so and sent it back to him. And I rewrote it knowing that he was shooting it the next day. So I wasn't, changing night to day and doing all the things that would just, wouldn't make any sense. I just did a dialogue polish basically. And he loved it and he shot it the next day. And the powers that be knew about it. And so I think a couple of days later, he called me again. And I think maybe I did 2 or 3 scenes that way, just a quick little polish just to help.
Yeah.
And that was Lionsgate. So later when they were doing My Bloody Valentine, he said, why don't we, because they were having some trouble with the original script. And they're like, why don't we go to Todd? And so he did. And he and I talked and we bantered and it just sort of came together so naturally. It was the same thing with The Messengers. I mean, it was called The Scarecrow when we worked on it. And that was ended up at Sam Raimi. But it was fun to work with somebody who had the same passion and had all his brain cells, because I don't think he's ever had a drink of alcohol, which is fantastic, which makes up for all the alcohol that I've had. And so it was nice to have somebody you could bounce those ideas off of. And it was just so much fun. And I miss that because it feels like the way movies are made today and the way stories are told today, the fun seems to be missing. And I feel it when I watch the movies. Sometimes they're not as fun as they used to be. Now, I don't know if that's because I'm getting old and it's just nostalgia, but to me, it feels that way.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. Everything's so fast, and there's so many movies. Like, I love dark comedies, and I feel like so many fall flat in the third act. There's some that are really good that I watch that are like, obviously independent films, but they have like big names in them, and it's like, okay, they should have done something, or maybe it's like for some reason they're making every movie 2 hours, which it's like, come on, can we get back to like the canon? 90 minutes.
Exactly.
Like it's almost like they don't realize that like going to the movies is a thing. Like people are busier nowadays. It just feels that way. So like, I don't know. It's just a shame that there's so many people that aren't going to experience some of, well, again, things can always change.
Yeah.
Like you can have those cycles of like,
And I think it will. I think they will change and things will come back around again. So anyway, I just looked over and saw myself on the video. I do look like Santa Claus sitting here in front of the freaking tree.
Yeah, you do a little bit. That's fine. And then he told me that you guys have an idea for a sequel. Obviously, it hasn't come to fruition yet, but he said there's some idea that
we do. It's funny. We went in and we pitched the sequel, I think 2 weeks before the movie came out. We pitched the sequel and the powers that be loved it. And then the movie came out and it was a hit. And we heard nothing. We heard crickets. And we were calling going, hey, we talked about the sequel. Nothing. And we'd talked to Jensen. We'd talked to Kerr. We'd talked to Eddie. We talked to everybody about coming back. And they were all in. And it just didn't happen. And I think every year or so we would go back and we would say, hey, you guys, it's been a year. What do you think about? Nothing. And then after a while, I think we went back on the 10-year anniversary. And I don't even know where we stand now. And we had to update the pitch every time because, the original pitch was going to take place like that same moment. The movie ends and you keep going. And the story keeps going from that point forward. They go to the hospital, everybody's hurt and so forth. And then we changed it up so that it was years later. And I think we were going to cast Bill Fichtner and we were going to bring Clancy Brown. And we had this whole vision of what it was going to be. And so, it could happen one day. I know I think there was talk of even it being a TV show at one point. So
really,
who knows what's going to happen?
That'd be cool. Obviously they did the Scream TV series. They did I know what you did last summer. So they
Yeah.
tried it. They're trying
Yeah.
those things. It's almost like sometimes they try those things, and again, people get maybe the person that did that first project wasn't ready, didn't do it right, and if something flops, then everybody's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I'm not gonna try that anymore."
No, they've done it, and TV has produced some fantastic horror.
Yeah,
Hannibal was a horror, and it was great.
Hannibal was good. I
And
like the
and
Canadian series, the Slasher, the Canadian series on Netflix. I thought that was really good. Every
I don't think I
year it
saw
was
that one.
different
I
setting,
remember that. I didn't
and
see
it
that.
was yeah, it was like a different setting. They used
Yeah.
the same actors, which was cool, in different roles, different names, and everything. So it's like a really
Oh,
cool because you're almost watching like a theater troupe,
what?
and
So
it was
like an
pretty
American Horror Story thing where they bring all the actors back and
kind of
just change
yeah,
up the story?
yeah.
That's
It was
cool.
cool. The first one was
And
Screamish. It was in like a small town.
I'm
One
gonna
of
check
them
it
was
out.
at
I
like a
haven't.
ski resort. No, it's
Yeah,
really cool.
I'm gonna check that out. Chucky was really good too, by the way. I
Oh,
love
Chucky was
Chucky.
great. I actually
So
liked the Scream series. There was one on, again, I don't know how this network ever made this show, but there was, oh my God. It was on Freeform, and
yeah,
it was called, oh shit, what was the name of it? It was on right after Pretty Little Liars. It was only on for 1 year, but it was amazing. Oh God, I'll send you the name. It was really
okay,
cool. It was set at a
that's
camp,
cool.
and
Yeah,
it was cool because you watched the setup and you're like, oh, I know what this is. Then the last two, you're like, holy shit. And it was like really good. And the girl was good.
okay,
It was the girl from the first season of You, the Beck in the first season of You, if you watch
yeah.
that
I
Netflix
know
show.
what you're talking about. Yeah,
So yeah, so she's a solid actress, but yeah, no, I'll get the name of that because that one's pretty good.
yeah. Do that and send it to me because I'll check that out. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I'm gonna
yeah,
rewatch that. It was a long time ago. I try to do that when I really like things. I try not to
yeah.
overwatch it, especially that genre. Like the movie The Game is one of my favorite movies of all time. But sometimes I just overwatch
Good
it, and
movie.
then I'm like, man, I know everything's coming. Maybe give it
Well,
another
that's
couple
one
of
of
years
those
and I'll go
movies
back
you
to it.
have to give it a number of years in order to go back
Oh
to it. You're
yeah,
like, oh,
you
I don't
have to.
remember that. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah,
so My Bloody Valentine. Then it's cool. You link up with him right away after that. I would
yeah,
Drive Angry.
we did, and that was just it was a thrill, and it's one of those things where I look back over different careers and I see a lot of times there are people in this industry who they're just lucky. Things happen and they grab the brass ring and it happens. Patrick is one of those guys. He's a fantastic editor. I mean, he
Yeah.
completely created the the Scream movies because he was I know you're very important.
Hey.
Why don't you go eat something? This is
Yeah.
Mia. She's his protector.
Hello.
Okay, you can lay right there. But he's a great director. He's a great editor. He's just he's one of those guys that his time is coming, and when it does, it's just going to explode
Yeah.
because he can write a movie knowing how he's going to edit it.
Mhm.
And I think that's phenomenal. And he can direct the movie. And when he's sort of time crunched, he knows what he can shoot in order to put it together in the editing room.
Yeah.
It's a technique that most directors, most writers don't have because they don't have that editing element. I certainly don't have it, and I envy it. So
Yeah. No, it's
but
true.
yeah, it was
I talked to a few editors that went to film or TV, and
yeah
it's unbelievable. On his career, again, he's typical Canadian. He's
yeah
when he started, it was that boom of the 80s
yeah
TV in Canada.
yeah
He's on like 21 Jump Street. And then he just
yeah
does this show that not many people know about, Nightmare Cafe. That's where he
yeah
connected with Wes for the first time. And then
yeah
Wes took a liking to him. And then the rest is history. He's working on a Wes movie every other year, it seems.
yeah. And he was the go-to guy, and
Yeah.
and rightfully so, and saved tons of movies. I mean, some of the stories, I don't want to tell his stories, but he has some
Yeah.
great stories. And I mean, I know he's told the Curse story at this point, but there's so many beyond Cursed. It's just
Yeah.
like I can remember him calling up saying, yeah, they've offered me this movie to edit. And I was like, you going to do it? And he goes, no. They'll come back to me later and they'll have to pay me 10 times as much just to fix it. And sure
Yeah.
enough, they would. He was so good at knowing how that stuff was going to work out and happen. So every chance that we get to work together, we jump at it because
No, that's great.
there's just that shorthand that you don't find with everybody. And it's nice to have that. But yeah, we've got stuff we're working on right now.
Cool.
He's shooting a movie.
Nice.
He's shooting a movie now. He's here in Europe. And when he finishes, we'll dive back in. So yeah, but Drive Angry. Back to that. Drive Angry was fantastic. Drive Angry was fun. Drive Angry was it. I think over the years I have learned that there are movies like Big Trouble in Little China where you're not quite sure what the genre is. Is it a comedy? Is it a horror?
Yeah.
Is it romance? What is it? Those kind of movies tend not to do well. Those are the movies I love. You know,
Hmm.
you could say Blade Runner falls into that category, and you look across the board. None of those movies did well at the box office, and I've done that a couple of times. Jason X didn't do well at the box office. Drive Angry didn't do well at the box office because what is it? Is it horror? Is it action? So? But can't help it. I like those movies that are just hard to define because I think it's
No,
fun.
I know.
I get I get tired of the same formula over and over.
Yeah,
Oh
when you
well.
know the formula when you're watching a movie, which is gonna be hard to be a writer, when you know, like, okay, this is the setup right
Yeah.
here, or
Yeah.
you want something to happen. Like even watching any movie, like my daughter wanted to watch Home Alone 4, which might be the worst movie of all time. But they used like
I don't
French
think I've seen
Stewart
that
to
one.
play Daniel Stern's character, and he's wearing the hat that Pesci wears. And it's just like the most confusing movie. But even in that movie, we're watching, we're like, it better be this lady that's the bad guy. And we're just watching it and we're watching it. We're like, we're gonna hate this movie even more. And it's like, all right, at least they got one thing right. But there's so many things in movies that
Right.
you just get so hung up on when it's like forgotten things like, hey, what just happened? Like, why did we not
Yeah.
address like this very important thing? And I'm sure when you watch a movie, you're like, wait, where are we right now? Like, what just happened?
Oh, I know. And certainly in the beginning, that stuff didn't get me. Like I go back to say Sixth Sense. I can remember at the end of Sixth Sense still not knowing who he was. And
Oh,
he
nice.
drops his ring and he drops the ring and it rolls across the floor. At no point did I catch on to it. But when I watched a movie back in those days, I was totally into it. I was just like, I
Yeah.
was along for the ride, and I was, and so I was often not the first one to catch what was going on. And then you do this for a number of years, and suddenly you start watching a movie, and you're like, he's the bad guy. Oh
I
yeah, that's gonna
know.
come. And it's like, oh no, I've become that person who guesses all the way through the movie, and I'm right at least half the time. So
Yeah. No, that is, it's like the fun thing about a murder mystery. Then sometimes I'm still here. I think my wife's calling me. But so yeah, so I remember watching Scream 2, which is one of my favorite Scream movies because I always loved the college setting for any like horror
yeah,
movie. And I remember
yeah,
seeing that movie as a kid and be like, why is the lady from Roseanne in this? She's got to be like, she's got to be involved in this. And then like again, she was doing what she was told to do, but it's like, I know this is weird. She's at all these places that she
yeah,
shouldn't be. Like they didn't hide it enough. There's a couple of times, but it was funny when Patrick talked about the first Scream edit. He's like, we had to take a whole
yeah,
scene out because people knew. Like there was a part that it was like, holy shit, it's like right in front of your face. We're telling you who it is. So he said they had to go like I think like a week or two before and take things out. I think that's so fun with the movie making aspect of like after. I know it could be a pain being the creator of it, but like when you do like the test audience or like studio execs or other people watching, you have to change things. But even like Jaws, like
yeah.
after the scene with the boat, they were like, all right, we have to add in, we have to show it goes through even more. And it's like they had Joe Alves, who I interviewed a long time ago, production
Yeah.
designer, do it in his driveway. So they added just like
Really?
2 crashes into a boat, and they just
Oh, I
filmed
never
that
knew
part
that.
of the boat in his driveway. And
I never knew that.
does it change? Do I? I've never seen it without it, but maybe
Yeah.
it was like Spielberg was like, I needed to hit 4 times, and it was only hitting 2 or something. It's like, all right, well he knows what he's doing.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
That's a different time too, that you could actually go back
Oh
and
my
make those
god.
kind
Yeah.
of changes that late in the
Oh
day.
yeah. Yeah, and
So
send it
I
out like,
just,
oh, we have to do this a week before, and it's like, really?
yeah,
This is crazy.
we went through a time where surprises, at least for me, I've never had much luck when it comes to surprises. Jason in Jason X becomes a robot. That was
Mhm.
supposed to be a secret. No one's ever supposed to know that nanotechnology brought him back. And by the way, I just saw the movie that reminded me of the nanotechnology. It was Denzel Washington and Virtuosity. You
Virtuosity.
remember
Oh my
Virtuosity?
god.
You
Yeah.
remember? He's the nanotechnology, and I loved it. And so I don't remember how early Virtuosity was compared to when I did Jason X, but that's where the
96,
nanotechnology
97.
came from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh
it
my
was
god.
perfect timing. And so that's where that came from. But it was all supposed to be a surprise. And then, of course, he's on the poster. And then the same thing on Drive Angry. When we wrote the script, it was at one point, I called Patrick and I said, okay, I did something. And I don't know if you're going to like it. And I shot Nick in the eye in the middle of the movie, or early in the movie. I was 30 minutes in. And he was like, how are you going to do that? And I was like, he's from hell. And he was like, well, if he's from hell, then we have to show him breaking out of hell. And I go, no, High Plains Drifter. High Plains Drifter, you never see where he comes from. You never get any of that backstory. And Batter's, oh, yeah. And so that's what we made. And then later the studio made us put in the driving hell, and they put him on the poster. And, you know, that has always and will always frustrate me, because part of, and this goes back to me telling stories around a campfire. Part of the fun of telling ghost stories around the campfire is that scare at the end, or to twist it so that everybody's all, uneasy and unnerved at the end of the story. It's a big surprise. That's what I've always enjoyed. And so anytime I put the big surprises in movies, they always get put on the poster. So
yeah, especially a movie that it's hard to have a surprise, because there's like that formula to Jason, like hockey mask, this. So yeah, I don't know why they would have done that.
I always felt like it was one of those things where if you went to see it and you didn't, like, I know when I went to see Big Trouble in China, I knew nothing about it. And so I'm going through this adventure, and suddenly there's Asian wizards, and I'm like, what is happening? And there's monsters, and I was loving every reveal, every moment of it. And even today, like, I saw the Superman teaser, and I will never see anything else, because that's a movie I'll go see. I don't want to know anything until I get in there.
Exactly. I did that with the Scream movies, the new ones. I avoided everything.
All of them.
Because I was like, it's gonna, they show something. Even like when they would have the poster, again, it's a cool poster, but it's like, someone on this poster is the killer. And it's like, I don't even want to look at that.
They got everybody on the poster. I don't even want to see it. Don't even show it.
Yeah.
In fact, you mentioned that one of the Scream movies, I saw someone on the poster, and the moment I saw them, I was like,
yeah,
that's the killer.
Yeah.
And I was right. Oh,
it's hard to go in blind with movies, because I'm guilty of the attention span thing now. But what is good is on like some social medias, people just like share movie posters, and they write like on this date in history, and they'll have like a little blurb about it, but you don't have to hit the more. And I'll look at the poster. Like, I watched Operation Condor. Have you ever seen that movie?
Remind me.
It's from 1977. It's about they're going to Mars. It was like 10 years after they went to the moon. It's
Who's in it?
Sam Waterston, James Brolin.
Yep, I have seen it.
And O.J. Simpson. So they're supposed to go on this trip.
Yeah, I have seen it. I remember Waterston.
Holy shit! What a great movie. What's his name? I can't think of his name. The director.
I have to watch it again. I can barely remember.
Yeah, he's the same director as the one with Gregory Hines and
Billy.
Yes, Billy Crystal, whatever that movie.
Billy Crystal.
Yeah. But anyway, that guy has directed a ton of great action. But like when you see these stunt scenes, you see the guy hanging on like an old like farm plane, holding onto it. And there's like good cameos like randomly that you wouldn't see on IMDb because they're not in the first thing. But like it's good to experience that, and you finish the movie, you're like, this is great. Going in blind is the best. But in the same sense, if you go in blind and you spend 2 hours watching a movie, and it stinks, you're like, oh shit, I should have really like done research maybe. But that's like the whole thing. I would never have seen so many movies as a kid. Because remember when you rented a movie as a kid, your dad gave you or your mom gave you like, hey, here's $5, which is crazy. That was like a new release price back in the day. Like you'd be like $5 to rent a movie. You started, it sucked. Guess what? You're finishing that because there's nothing else that you have. So it was like a better time for that. Because I wouldn't have this useless movie knowledge for like these random canon movies or, those Sorority House Massacre 2s and all those.
I had never thought about that. There were movies that we watched when we were growing up that we hated, but we watched them because we'd rented it and there was nothing else we had to watch.
Yeah.
I forgot
Video
all
games
about
too.
that.
I remember renting Booger Man for Super Nintendo. It was the worst game, but my dad's like, hey man, you got it for 5 days. And it's like, oh, this is horrible.
Yeah, because we never stopped watching a movie. We always watched. Wow. Yeah. I forgot all about that.
And that's what kids don't understand. Like my wife is a middle school teacher, not to go too off tangent, but like she'll mention names. Like I'm not joking, Todd. Like you got to think like Will Ferrell. Who you think like, oh, everybody sees Elf. There's like students don't know who he is.
I have no idea.
Tom Cruise. It's not like deep cuts. It's not like she's like, oh yeah, remember this guy from the. No, nothing like that. They're like big names. If it's not
Yeah.
a Marvel person, and even
Yeah.
that, it's like this weird change in that because they're like, oh yeah, I know this YouTuber guy. That's what their entertainment is.
I mean, I certainly grew up in a completely different world because there were only 3 television stations, and then Fox
Yeah,
came along, and now, there's content on hundreds of stations, and there's a lot of time, and the world has changed so much that there'll be a show coming out, and then you have to figure out if you actually pay for the service that provides
I
that
know.
show.
I
And
know.
being in Portugal has been a true challenge because there's some things you can't watch in Portugal that you can watch in the States. Of course, there's VPNs, but now there are things that know that the VPN is there. And
Yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah.
we started watching the Steve Martin Short show
Oh yeah,
when
yeah.
we were
That's
in the
good.
States. And then we moved here and we can't keep watching it because we can't get through the blockers and everything else, even though we pay for it still. So it's all
Yeah.
very, very tricky in
And the
this.
Region 8 DVDs are like that weird thing in Europe when it's
Oh,
like the
absolutely.
DVDs and the Blu-ray have to have like a certain region code and you have to have a matching DVD player. It's like,
Yeah. I
come
mean,
on.
yeah, we could bring none of our DVD players, none of our Xboxes, none of it will play here. They don't even
That's
plug into the wall here. So
That's
yeah,
insane.
such a
Crazy.
horrible, such a horrible problem to have in your little castle.
I know that is true.
Yeah. So anyway, by the
Oh
way, it was a
man.
fixer-up castle, so it wasn't perfect. It's been a
But
lot of
that's
work.
cool. Is that something you always like when it came up, it was like when you looked in Portugal, did you have an idea of what you wanted look wise?
No, we came here because we saw a picture of this place online, and it looked
That's a
run
movie.
down, but it looked like, yeah, I know it is. It looked run down, but it looked like, this is something we could turn into. And later we had an architect come through because there's no paperwork on the place because it's too old. Like no blueprints exist.
Oh my
And so
god.
we had an architect come along and we said, is it worth buying? And he goes, well, you're the only two crazy enough to buy it. But yes, it's very well built. So, but I
Wow.
mean, it leaked. We had no electricity. We had no water. Our water comes from a well. We have 5 wells. I mean, it is wonderful. And we are going to shoot. As soon as we get all set up, we're going to shoot. And
Oh,
we're
cool.
starting a film school here in Portugal. So, because there's not a lot of crew here. And so we're going to
Totally.
train the
Yeah.
crew and then we're going to shoot stuff here and on the grounds and amidst our 70 goats and our orange grove and apple grove and olive trees and everything else.
But it's cool you're
It's a
doing that
very
because a lot
weird
of
life.
countries don't have that. Like I talked to a
No.
stunt guy, Chuck Borden, who's been in a million stuff. His wife
Yeah.
was from the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So he moved out here and he's like, sometimes like I'm trying to like do things, but you can't get a budget to do like certain stunts because it's like, oh, they don't make movies with that.
Yeah.
Or even like I talked to directors like in the 70s, 80s that were from Israel. They knew no movies other than what was in Israel. So they were seeing these movies. And then the guy Sam Versberg goes on to like do like a bunch of like American Ninja, like those type of
Yeah.
movies. So it'd be cool if you do that because you might find that next generation of where the other films can be shot.
There's no doubt because everyone here grew up on American movies and they also grew up listening to them in English language. That's how most of them learned to speak English, just from movies. And so they love American movies but they just don't have an outlet for teaching and training. My wife's from TV. And so we're putting this together and we've joined with the school in Coimbra. And I mean, it's a process and it's unending. Plus at the same time, we're fixing this place up.
Yeah.
And, which we're mostly done with.
That's cool.
This
Where'd you
part
guys
of it.
meet, on a set or just in Hollywood?
No,
somewhere?
we met at, where did we meet? We met at Patrick's birthday party.
Oh, really?
Met at his, yeah, she had showed up with a Doctor Who cake and, with, the TARDIS and everything else, candied TARDIS all around it. And I was like, well, she's the one. And,
Look at that.
and then
the rest is history.
the rest was history. It took a little while before we started going out, but we were friends first and then started dating and then we came here in 23 and have been here ever since. I just now got my card so that I can officially leave the country because
oh, really?
I was at a
it
point
took that
where,
long for you to get out?
well, yeah, if I had left, they weren't going to let me back in. And so I had to get my residency first. And so now I have that so I can leave the country and go and do it.
There you
so
go.
I did. I just went to Dublin. So it's lovely. But,
Nice.
you know.
No, that's awesome. So I always like, this has been so much fun. I always like to ask folks a few questions from like the beginnings in a sense. So if you didn't go into this, if you didn't like obviously you blocked out all the noise of your buddy's parents saying, "Ah, you can't do that. We're in Kentucky. You can't get this career." Was there any other idea you had, like career wise? Was there something like a family business or anything else that you had on like the back burner, or was it just write or die?
No, I was going to be a writer, but when I went to school, I went through for marketing and English because I felt like, well, if I can't make it as a novelist, then maybe I could do advertising because then you still get to write and it's creative and you can tell these really great stories, but you tell them in these tiny little blocks. So I thought advertising would be fun. And but I never had to fall back on that. And the truth is, I'm glad I did it because in this business, every meeting that you take is a salesman. Every
Oh yeah,
pitch that you give, every person you meet with, it's all to some degree sales. Certainly in California, it's not like that in Portugal, but
yeah, I'm sure.
in California, that's the thing. So it certainly came in handy. But my dad was in construction, and my dad, bless his heart, was one of those guys who he just never. It was a big waste of time to teach me how to do something, so he would just do it himself. And so
Yeah,
I learned while being on construction sites and such. But now that I'm in this situation where you know, I'm building stuff inside this wee little castle. It's been a blessing to have all of that knowledge in my head that I know
yeah,
how to cut a piece of wood and so forth. So I what I like about it is at the end of the day I can see I do my work and at the end of the day I see, oh look, this thing is built now. And that's nice. And it's
yeah,
very comparable to a screenplay. At the end of the day, you have this scene that's put together. It might not be perfect. It might need some tweaking. It might need some
yeah,
polishing, but it's there and you feel it and you see it and the characters are coming alive. And so building and writing, I never knew they were that close together. So makes a lot of
yeah.
sense to
No,
me
that's
now.
really cool. That's a good comparison. Like if we have big things in our house to do, we bought an old Victorian house that was built in Jersey, so it was built in 1911. And it's true. If it's something you can do,
Yeah.
when you get it done, it's like, all right, if it's a little off, if it looks good enough,
Yeah.
but if I paid somebody X amount of dollars to do it and it didn't come out right, then I have to like hound the guy. And I just think about that whole, just getting estimates, man, just that whole front.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like, it'll be a 3 different people. I could just buy a table saw for $200 and do everything that I can.
I love that you said that because one of the tenants just called a couple of days ago and right before Christmas and said our fence is falling down. And I built that fence. And this is in Manhattan Beach. So we still got two little houses that we rent out there.
Oh,
And
whoa,
so
that's nice. Yeah.
the fence is falling down. And so I was like, so I'm going to have to get an estimate. And the estimate was outrageous. And
Oh,
then
yeah,
I
I'm
was
sure.
like, it was $1,000 to fix this tiny little piece of fence. And I was thinking, if I was there, I would have already fixed it in the amount of
Yeah.
time that it has taken, in the 6 hours that it's taken me to try to find somebody to do it. That's frustrating.
It's like you make
But
a
it's
phone
more,
call. Hey, what's up, man? I haven't talked to you since I lived there in 2023. You think
yeah,
you can go over there and fix this?
fix my
The
fence.
estimate's
Wow.
yeah.
So
Wow.
anyway, but it's
How
cheaper. I
about
guess it's cheaper than a flat bag
yeah, no, that is
to
oh my
fix
god,
my
that is true.
fence.
Yeah. So how about like mementos early on in your career? Did you have the wherewithal like on Jason X or even my bloody Valentine to keep things that were like important? Like obviously I'm sure you have scripts, but did you keep any props or anything?
Yeah, I've got a ton of props. They're with my buddy Evan. I was worried about flying over with my severed head from
Oh yeah, I'm
Jason
sure.
X,
I'm
and
sure.
and so I left all of that stuff in California, like the God Killer. How do you bring the God Killer from Drive Angry on an
Yeah.
airplane? I'm sure there are rules about that, but I wasn't sure what they were, and I don't want to mail them because then they'll get stuck in customs, and so I've got to figure out how to get all my stuff. But yeah, I've got the God Killer. I've got the severed head from Jason X. I've got the bull by the balls, which is this little bust from Drive Angry where she's riding a bull, but she's got his balls right here and
Yeah.
stretched up from behind him. And he's got big bulgy eyes because of that. What else do I got? I've got the wig from Drive Angry, the man with wig war.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
I've got the knife from Trick. Bunch of different. Oh, machete from Jason X. A bunch of different nitpicky
No,
stuff
it's
that
cool you
I've
did that. There's so
collected
many
over the
people I
years.
talk to that maybe they didn't think about it. Because sometimes you're like so in it that you
Yeah.
don't think about it. Obviously, with
Well,
writing, it's
that's
more of a
true.
baby for you. But if it's like
That is
a
true.
guy that's on his first movie and maybe he's like henchman number 6 or something, like
Yeah.
it is so hard to think about. Like when you're like, all
Yeah.
right, this is so new. Am I standing in the right spot? And then you like sometimes can be like so out of your head, you're not thinking about anything.
Yeah. And it's like that with certainly being a writer, director, editor, Patrick and I being a team that way. There's
Mhm.
always been like I'm losing the thought. What's the thing when you hide things in movies?
Oh, Easter eggs, really?
Easter eggs. Yeah, we always wanted to do Easter eggs, but when you get into production, it is so
I'm sure.
devouring every moment and every bit of time. We never end up doing it. So I would love to do a movie where I could just take a breath and put in some Easter eggs and fun stuff just for crazy fans, not the normal
Yeah.
Joe, flipping around on his Netflix looking for something to watch. But for somebody who really loves the genre and so forth, I would love to do that because I love seeing that stuff myself.
Yeah.
And so
Have
I
you
would
done
like
that
to
with
do
like
that.
character names or streets or anything? Like
Oh,
something
yeah,
from your
all the
hometown or
time.
family member? Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, every single movie, the character names all come from something. In Jason X, the majority of the character names came from this video game called EverQuest, and it
Oh
was
yeah.
a online fantasy play. And all those guys, Waylander was a troll warrior that I hung around with for ages. Sunarin was a wizard who I hung out with for ages. Lo was my name from the game. Um, so I mean, it was yeah. So
That's cool.
I think we did the same thing with and here's something I always thought was funny. In the beginning of My Bloody Valentine, you have two kids who are lost in the mine, and one is Michael
Mhm.
and the other is Jason. Not on purpose, total
Oh,
accident.
really?
That those two guys are named Michael and Jason. Didn't even enter my mind. Just happened. Well,
Oh man. And then last question, because it's so funny. I talk to like whatever particular job on set, and then when I'm
yeah,
done, I maybe don't talk to a writer for like a few months. And I'm like, oh, I
yeah.
should ask that. But like, what's like your writing process? I know it's not always the same, but like, let's say if you're sitting down at the laptop today, like, what is there like music? Are you like, what is it the same thing every time? Do you have like a superstition kind of thing, like while you're writing?
Fortunately, it's not the same thing every time. When I first started doing this, I wrote
Yeah.
nonstop. So I would percolate the idea. I'd walk around, I'd go to Disneyland, but I would be in the idea. And then I would sit down and start writing, and I would write 24/7. I would write all the time. I'd take a break to tinkle and I'd take a break to sleep and then
Yeah.
eat while I was eating. And I smoked back then. So I was smoking packs and packs and just writing. And that's how it was done. And then I had a kid, and that all changes. And so, and fortunately, I realized I didn't know until then that I could actually write in small chunks. Well, I could write for a bit. I knew I didn't like it that way, but I could do it
Yeah.
because I had a kid and I had different ways of going about it. But now I think it changes when you get older too, because now I really like getting up early, and I never used to like getting up early. Like I
Agreed.
would
Yeah.
write all night long and then sleep all day. But I like getting up early when it's quiet and I come in. This is the winter room. So this is, there's a bunch of scary dolls right over there. The fireplace is over there. And I'll swing
Was
you
there any
around.
weird stuff left in your house that you kept because you were like, I have to?
Yeah, all those dolls.
Are you serious? Like that? Or
Yeah.
just randomly throughout the house?
No, they were randomly all over the place. I
That's
put
a
them out.
horror movie too.
I put
That
them
should be
out
the
in the
movie. You move
garage.
into a house, there's a bunch of rando
Yeah.
dolls with nothing
Yeah.
else.
The fireplace, it's almost
That's
out, but
cool.
anyway, the fireplace over there. But anyway, yeah, there were dolls. There were dolls all over the place. And then we be right back where it was. And then we put them. My wife was like, "No, you got to get rid of them." So we put them out in the garage. And then every time, her brother's with us as well, and so he's a plumber and electrician, so he's living here with us, and so
Oh,
we were
nice.
fixing this up together. So every time he and I would go out into the garage, they were in a different position. And I don't know if
Oh
he
my
was
god.
trolling me because I wasn't trolling him, and I don't think he was
Yeah.
trolling me.
That's
But
amazing.
so they, you know, and it all wasn't always like huge. It was like, you know, the one doll would be like this the next day. And I was like, okay, well, that could have been a bird. It could have been lots of
Yeah,
things, but it
yeah, yeah,
happened too much. Nothing else in the garage was moving around. And so I brought them back in the house, and she was like, "Why would you bring them back in the house?" And I said, "They were unhappy out there,
yeah, yeah.
and
They're
now they're
moving out there.
and now they're fine.
Yeah,
They're quite happy. Sometimes I'll swap them around, and I am
to mess
actually
with everyone.
writing. Yes, no, I do that just because I feel like they need to. You know, they might get
Rotation,
sick in the
yeah.
back, and yeah, they might
Yeah.
like to move around.
Yeah.
And so everyone who sees them hates them and is totally scared
Yeah.
of them, but I like them. And so, yeah, so I'm writing something that involves them. And
I
so
like it.
hopefully if we put together our crew here in Portugal, we'll shoot it here. That's the
Yeah.
plan.
Wow, Todd, this has been a blast, man. I'm so happy we connected. Thanks for taking the time. And
I enjoyed it. Thanks for the chat.
yeah, dude. Yeah, I'll let you know when this comes out, and happy holidays, man.
All right. Take care.
See you later, man. Have a great rest of your day.
See you later.